Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
No, absolutely. I'm glad to be here. It's going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to it. So when the idea was first proposed to me to have this conversation, I was trying to learn what localization was. Let me just start there. And the more you and I got to talk offline, I was like, this is fascinating. So what could you introduce us to this idea of what localization is and what translation is in your experience? And why should anybody who just tuned in, before we get them to click away, why should they care about this idea?
Yeah, I mean, the overarching idea is to help people bridge a language barrier, bridge a language gap, or engage with other parts of the world. And I like to think about the difference between translation and localization. And sometimes I use the word synonymously myself, and I'm in this industry. Translation is just sort of the literal translation of words into other words. But localization gets down to that nuance, that context, the use of idioms, and also even things like how currency is translated in, or is represented, I should say, in one locale to another, or how date formats are from one locale to another. And why it matters is you either come across as engaging and speaking to somebody and meeting them where they are, or basically trying to force upon them just a garbage translation of your native language. And so companies love it because they want to make sure that they're truly meeting their customers, their volunteers, their workers, their whomever, really where they are in their local language. And that's the difference between translation, which is just literal words to other words, and localization, which is sort of meeting them in their true local language.
Right. And I don't know, I think it's the same idea. It's not the same application, but I think it makes the point, which is I'm in the data center business, and I was having a conversation not long ago with a group of peers, and we were talking about acronyms to avoid, et cetera. And we will, between ourselves, use a word colocation and data center interchangeably.
Right.
But they can mean wildly different things. Colocation to us implies a particular type of data center, a particular type of customer in the data center, a particular type of design, what services are available, et cetera. Whereas a data center may not. You can't be colocation without being a data center, but you can be a data center without being colocation. And so if you're just casually familiar with the industry and trying to have a conversation with somebody who's very familiar with it, you can cause a lot of confusion, if not offense, when you start talking about design and architecture, and I can help you. Because usually I think in the context that we're talking about, I'm coming to a group of people and say, hey, look, I want to help you do something, or I want you to consider me to perform some service or whatever. Well, if you're right out of the gate offending me because you're using the wrong words or the wrong presentation or whatever, I'm probably not going to listen to you.
No, that's exactly right. And it doesn't just happen across languages. It happens within the same language, or it happens with different dialects as well. So yes, if you just even use a colloquial term of colo or something, right, it may not translate, and it may not truly be understood by the person on the other side and create confusion. I think about it earlier on in my career. I was heavy in the telecommunications industry as well, and we wanted to branch the software we were offering out into the financial services. And we went to see Bank of America, and we sat down in the meeting, and we lost it within 5 minutes because we said, yep, when you're subscribers, and they looked and they said, we don't have subscribers, we have customers. So you clearly are not familiar with our type of business. And from that point, they just sort of shut off.
Right.
Now, we with our technology, we think about localization more as going cross language, but it certainly exists within language as well.
Yeah. So we're talking about it today. I have to catch myself because I always think about whatever conversation I have in the context of now. I'm in the process of building digital infrastructure to connect the whole world to the modern economy and the modern way of life, whatever that looks like. It's this digital life. Has localization, the way that you think about it, Is that a just an internet age phenomenon? Is that a much larger phenomenon? How would you answer that?
Yeah, it's certainly a much larger phenomenon, but the new piece of localization is the concept of continuous localization. And continuous localization came with the internet age. So continuous localization is a context that needs to be localized, well, continuously. And what I mean by that is I think about an example to say, if you have a car, the owner's manual that's sitting in the glove box collecting dust and getting gum stuck to it and whatever else,
Right.
is something that's existed from a localization standpoint for a long, long time. If you flip through it, it's probably in 5 different languages, if not more. It is produced one time, it's localized one time, and it's left there forever. Well, in the internet age, now we have software updates that are happening to our applications. We have website content that's being always updated. New blog posts are being put out there. We're putting out new advertisements, banners, tweets, and things like that. That's that continuous localization where truly every day, if not multiple times a day, if not real time, there's content that's being generated, that's being immediately published, that needs to be localized. So there was an old, pass along an Excel spreadsheet with a whole bunch of strings of text, give it to people who are native speakers in that language, who are experts, who are linguists, and they'll do the translations, and that book will go into your glove box forever. And then there's the kind of the newer form of localization that's grown with the internet, which is, hey, I'm updating content real time. I want to speak to my customers in their native language as fast as I'm speaking to customers in the source language.
Right. I have a question to ask, but I'm going to predicate it by sort of this comment. So my wife and oldest daughter are about to go to Japan. My wife's half Japanese. They're really excited to go. My daughter has been studying the Japanese language for a very long time, both formally and informally. My wife, she knows some of it from her mom, although her mom didn't emphasize to her kids speaking Japanese when they were born in America. You're going to speak English. But anyway, my wife's like, no big deal. I have this. She's a combination of Google Translate and I think Babbel and some others, and she is just like, let's go. And she's been practicing. And my daughter will sometimes, when she's over visiting, laugh or be horrified from the other room at the answer that the tool gave, because it takes time for the tool, as accurate as they are. And I think they're amazing freaking tools. I can't even believe how good these things are. But when they get it wrong, it gets it really, really wrong. So I think that we as people, let me just say for me, I can get these ideas, even though you've articulated them wrong. Is that a common experience that, we think we got this and it just goes haywire?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I recommend hitting Google and looking for translation mistakes, and there are some amazing ones where you have automated or machine translations, as you call them, like Google Machine Translate, or there's a number of different ones that are out there, DeepL and others, but where there's no human review or there's no quality assessment on it. And it's like, great, I put it through a machine translation and I published it. There are massive, massive mistakes that have happened to Fortune 50, Fortune 5 type of companies who've just put themselves in a very bad position, let's say, on using maybe colloquial terms that when translated are extremely offensive. But there are even ones that we see from our customer base where you have something like a savings goal. So a financial services company who says they put promotional material out that says you've reached 30% of your savings goal this month or something. If you just use normal machine translation, that very, very well may translate to something like, you've achieved 30% of trying to score a goal on the soccer pitch, right? Like just the word goal is instead of an objective is truly like scoring a point, right? In some sort of a sport. So there are nuances where we may not even seem like we're using idioms when we're speaking, and we're speaking fairly formally, that translation, that Google Translate that your wife's going to use in Japan probably will work most of the time. But sometimes she may get some really funny looks when she asks for, a potato chip on her pizza or something like that. Yeah.
Does it, and I'm genuinely curious, is this, so far we're saying words, does it work with images, or is it strictly words?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful part of where the technology is going, and really where you're going to see this you're going to see this massive consumption of compute. Tying it back to your business a bit,
right.
There is a lot of compute that happens for localization that goes beyond text. Text is pretty low power, if you will. But where you really start getting into what's interesting is, think about an image and you're promoting some service as a company, and you have you're promoting it in America, and behind you you have the Statue of Liberty or the Brooklyn Bridge or something like that, some American landmark. Yeah, that's there. You want to promote the same service in France, and the Brooklyn Bridge or Statue of Liberty isn't really playing well there, and so you want to convey that same message. Right now, it's a human who says, okay, well, I'm going to go create this. I'm going to translate the text that's on that, and then I'm going to go take that image out, and I'm going to put an image of the Eiffel Tower or something like that behind this couple who's there to buy my services. That's going to start happening, and we're seeing it today through generative AI as an example, which is basically, let's localize not just the text on the image, but let's localize the image itself. And you start to see that also with speech to speech. So not only do I want to be able to have written text, but I want to have a little video, and I want to dub a new language over the top of that. Today, it's very expensive, very time consuming. But right now we're experimenting, and when I say we, collectively, the industry is experimenting with more real-time AI generated speech to speech. So you can produce just as fast as you can in the native language, you can be producing your localized spoken content as well.
So that's a great segue. I have a question. We didn't practice this, so I apologize. Over Christmas time, I bought one of my daughters. I have 3 daughters, all in their 20s, all art. One's a Japanese kind of guru, the other's Korean, and the other's Merca, all about Merca. But anyway, my daughter that. I bought this T-shirt for her, and I'm not going to say the word. It wasn't anything vulgar. I thought it was a really cute phrase. I'm a drawer, and I like these things and whatever. And I gave it to her, and she looked at it in horror. I was like, "What's that's you?
What did I do?
You like animation? You're a graphics art major. You study Korean. You do these things." And she's like, "Every poser on the planet." I think she used a different word, but that's my word from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Would wear this shirt. I would never wear this shirt, kind of to our point about the image. In other words, I certainly had the right heart. I had these phrases and ideas in my mind, but it wasn't just the image, it was the application. Like, I just missed on what I would want to do. When you were talking about AI, so I have lots of conversations with people about AI all the time, and there is, whether we're talking about large language models or all the various forms that AI is employed or deployed. One of the interesting conversations to me right now is the idea of structured versus unstructured data. So in structured data or structured training, or however we want to describe it, we're introducing to the model, this is what right looks like. This is what a bee is. This is a flower. Here's the number 9, whatever. In unstructured, usually it comes out of, you've done some training. Now that you've done some training, I'm going to put you out in the real world, and I want you, or some not trained, world, and I want you to give me your educated guess. And many times it's, in fact, regularly, we're not sure how they got to that spot, but it's cool and it's interesting. And I use this, for example, when I mess with DALL-E and I have it make images for me. But I'm
just
wondering,
not T-shirts.
Not T-shirts. I probably would have been better off doing that, as a matter of fact. But I'm curious, in your world of localization, as where technology hits this and large language models hit this, how do you have this balance of, I want the agility of real time, the speed of real time, but I want to greatly mitigate the risk. I mean, that's part of localization's goal is,
Right.
I don't want it to go out there, whatever the it is, a private LLM, a public LLM, whatever it is, to come back with an answer that gets me an equal to or greater than complexity or hot water than something that's fully trained. So as you're in this space and you're developing these tools, how do you balance or how do you intersect with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really, really, really gets to the heart of where there's a concept today of human in the loop for localization. And so machine translation has been around for a number of years. And there are some excellent companies out there who focus on machine translation, which then evolved into neural machine translation, which was, more of more customized training, if you will, of a generic machine translation model. And what a machine translation model is effectively think about it like we would think about a large language model like a ChatGPT that's specific for translations. There's no prompting or anything that goes into it. You basically feed it a source string and the target language, and it returns a result to you, right? So it's a simplified, and everyone's basically getting the same answer, no matter what company you are or whomever you are that's asking this MT model. You're basically going to get the exact same answer as everybody else. Just like that T-shirt, right? That's that exact same sort of generic T-shirt that somebody who's just getting into anime or whatever it might be. It's like, yeah, look at me. All right, I got the shirt.
Right.
So you have this human in the loop, which says, hey, you got me most of the way there. Thank you, because it was a couple hundred character string or something that you were asking me to translate. Now I, as the human in the loop, I'm going to post edit it. And I'm going to essentially follow things like a glossary of terms. We use this specific term in this industry, or with our company, it's a brand term that we use or something like that. Or it might be a style guide that says we speak in this specific tone of voice or whatever it might be. So now it's taking that sort of generic T-shirt, if you will, and saying, hey, look, I actually like this, particular form of anime or whatever it might be. And the issue with that human in the loop is that it doesn't necessarily scale from a time perspective. It takes a little bit of time from generating the string, but you still have a human who has to review it, edit it, touch it up, and so on. And the second piece of that is it doesn't remove a lot of the cost element to it. So when you have the human in the loop, you still have the cost element to applying the kind of brand tone of voice, if you will. So where LLMs and generative AI are coming in, which is different than what you had with MT, is that concept of prompting. So now you can prompt the LLM to return to you a translation that's in your tone of voice, that's in your brand identity, and it's getting closer to not requiring that human in the loop. But we're not there yet, right? There's still no de facto quality estimation that says this one is ready to go to publishing. It still requires either a company who says, hey, that material, if it's a little off, it's okay, just publish it, or have a human still kind of review it to make sure that it's meeting those standards, if you will, before publishing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer. I don't want my CFO to use an LLM to do the things that he's doing. But for somebody like me, that is, the other day, as I told you offline, I was speaking at PTC, and I wanted to break my brain in a fresh set of images. They didn't have to be branded with my organization's name. And my friend Rebecca Weekly reminded me of, she comes from the world of, this very structured hardware world. And she said, we get thinking, starting at MIT and all the way up through, after a while, in your first few years, you're wildly innovative because you don't know the boundaries yet. But over time, now philosophically, you might get expanded, but in technology, you tend to get more, I know how light works. I know how these things work. And on the one hand, it's a benefit, but on the other, it can become rigid in your thinking. It's very difficult to shift your paradigm. So I asked DALL-E to create images for me. I actually asked ChatGPT, hey, I want to turn this from a single campus into a big campus, or whatever. Where it was, so it helped me to see things that I would never have imagined before because my brain would have always thought of it a certain way. And so it gave me a portfolio to choose from. But then I applied the human in the loop to it because I was able to say, that does not look at all like what I'm trying to describe. That is not a data center campus evolving into this. That would terrify people.
That's some abstract art that, not sure how it got there.
Yeah, sure. And so while I appreciated its imagination, I would love if it had a model either over time of learning me or learning my industry or whatever that only happened 1 in 12 times. To the T-shirt, if I just asked my wife, who's an expert in this area, hey, I'm thinking about getting our daughter this, what do you think? She'd be like, oh, save your money. Or just give her a gift card to Starbucks or whatever. Because she just, and I would have been deflated because I thought I was such an imaginative genius, but I would have avoided this mild thing. How do we, I appreciate what you're saying about the human in the loop, but how do we have that check and balance, not just to theme, but to find the gaps? Because I want all of the promise of LLMs. I love the idea of where it could get to. But while we're on our way there, just personally, I find a lot of thank goodness I checked that because that would have gone really, really wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's hallucinations. We've heard that term before in AI, where the model's job is to return a result, and so it's very, very, very infrequently that you'll have an LLM return to you, I don't know, or just a blank screen. It's going to generate an answer of some sort. Right. And they've gotten better, right? They've gotten better at their hallucinations by saying, I don't see anything called the flux capacitor 9000, but here's what it might be, right? And so it hints to you that it's hallucinating a little bit, making stuff up. That's just the term that the industry uses for AI making stuff up is hallucinations. But the human in the loop concept, I think, will scale to something, and this isn't my direct thought. I jump onto thoughts that I've seen from other folks and read, is that it'll move to kind of like a human in the center of the concept, and it goes along with what you were mentioning about. I wish over time it would learn about my industry or me or my preferences and so on, and we do that today in single threads. So if you maintain a single thread with an LLM like ChatGPT, you can refine it over time. No, I don't like the predominance of the color red in that image. Never generate an image for red again. As long as that thread stays open, that session that you're engaging on, you won't see red again. But as soon as you come back, red will be back there again. Right. So there are commercial applications for things like retrieval augmented generation. You hear RAG sometimes as a way to securely sort of not retrain the entire third-party public LLM, but to be able to augment it with some of your personal data, some of your personal preferences. ChatGPT has done a really great job, or OpenAI has, with their custom GPTs, where you can now train the custom GPT for your use specifically, or you can release it into their app store, if you will, their GPT store, where you can train it to say, when you're referencing information about data center growth, make sure to reference these specific materials versus what it's been trained on maybe over time. So there are ways that we can get there, but the only way that we see scale in our business, the scale is the linguists need to be language specialists who are certainly helping with localizing piano tuning practices from Hungarian to Latvian or something like that.
Right.
But your general, translations and localization scale needs to be where your models do learn over time how you like to produce these localizations and things. And that's the only way that we'll get to scale.
That seems like a pretty daunting task. I mean, you mentioned cost earlier. I mean, one of the big things that we talk about all the time on this podcast is we are for sure in a hype cycle, and I don't say that in a negative way. I mean, we're in a hype cycle. I love it. Let's get on board. We're going to the new world. Grab some oranges, and off we go, right? And so you got to go. You got to find the explorers to go, the early adopters.
Bring them limes as well.
Bring them limes. We've learned. We've learned.
Out.
Yes,
yeah.
we've learned. And the people that are there don't think of it as the new place either. So, all kinds of things. Sure. Yeah. But I guess I mean, as as we go on this exploration, early adopter, there's a lot of, so then, the marketplace then gets involved. And as my friend Sarah at Uber said, everybody's got an AI story. Like, this is not new. We've been doing this for a long time in a variety of ways. There may be a different application of it. And so now there's a lot of, more and more I'm finding there's a lot of, how do I find the problem this is actually going to solve, and that I can afford to do it, because I don't want to do a bunch of rework. Like I want it as it's applying, and it doesn't have to solve it all at once. It can be on our way to paradise. We can eat it on the way to paradise. We can do it incrementally. That's fine. And probably most likely we would do that. So as you, both in the industry and for your organization, how do you think about, we're identifying this thing, I want to be able to leverage something that's going to scale over time. Even if I have a person in a loop here, I want to be able to move them further out so that I've got more tools doing the work, and the human oversight coming in less and less needed because the tools get more and more accurate, and it's affordable along the way. How do you think through that when you're, two reasons. One, the cost, and the speed. It's not just the scale, it's the speed at which we're accelerating.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the cost side, right now we feel there's about 90% of the cost that can be removed from the localization value chain. And that's a lot of what's happening from the human translators, if you will. And this isn't all bad news for the human translators. It's not that everybody should go find new jobs. Right. No, the amount of content that is currently being localized is a fraction of 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 a percent of what's being generated. And generative AI has actually increased exponentially, truly exponentially, the amount of content that's being generated. I just read an article today that Google is being flooded with so much generative AI based material that users are going back to humans. They're going back to TikTok and others to like ask people. I can't trust what I'm seeing anymore because it's just being flooded. So my point there is there's 90% of the value to be, or the cost to be removed from that value equation right now, the cost equation, of localization. But the amount of localization scale that's going to happen is going to more than make up for it. It's just going to be, they're going to shift from what those people are doing. They're going to be language specialists and not just sort of translators from English to French or whatnot. Right. And so when there's that big of a chunk of cost that can be taken out, it's a problem we're solving, right? Because it's going to drive that second point, which is the scale. So how do we get there? Part of how we get there is we are trying to take an anti-black box approach. LLMs are black boxes and they're really scary to a lot of people. How did it get that answer? Why did it say that? How can I trust that? And so on and so forth. Right. With Google or something, you understand there's a source behind it and you can always click, click, click and get there. Sure. LLMs, it's a little scary. Right. So what we're attempting to do at Transifex is to demystify that a little bit. We're never going to break down how the LLM is completely trained and so on. But what we're going to do is show you with our, say, quality estimation, why is this a good string? Why do we believe you can put it into production right away? And we're going to show that analysis behind the machine learning. We're going to show why, because there were similarities in these linguistic styles, and here's the data that shows it, and here's the actual strings that we thought fell outside of that, and here's the revision that was made. As long as we can explain that, the humans will gain more and more trust. And as they gain more and more trust, they'll be willing to back away from that, as you mentioned, human in the loop, and move to that, hey, I can be at the center, I could be at the start of the process of training it or labeling good versus bad. I don't need to be looking at every single translation like I am today.
Yeah. For me, so is that a person that's doing that in the beginning, that's doing that evaluation? Is that a machine that you've specifically trained to evaluate? How do you imagine that that's going to progress, at least I would imagine, because we're talking about scale and speed, at some point it's going to be a trusted machine or a trusted tool evaluated, which we do all the time, evaluates the accuracy of something else. How do you get started now? Because you don't want to wait, because then it just gets away from you.
Yeah, and it has to be trained by a human. So where it starts out is you have the trusted human trusting or training the model, if you will, right. And a lot of that is I was talking to an analyst, Arl at CSA, and they do a lot of research around quality estimation, quality assessment, quality assurance, and things like that. And he made a comment that was, you can't spot check these translations because they don't occur randomly. So it's not like Lucille Ball picking up the chocolate as it's coming off the conveyor belt sort of thing, right? It's something where you really need to understand the root of the bad translation. But the way that these models get trained today is you have to have the gold standard. And today the gold standard is the human. The gold standard is the human who said, yes, this is good. I'm not offending anybody. Right. It's saying savings goal like financial versus a soccer goal or something like that. It's this one's ready to go. Okay, great. Well, that's easy then.
Right.
We have a million machine learning models that we can use that say, if this is the gold standard, make sure that what we produce matches that. That's relatively straightforward.
Right.
What we need to move to is creating a gold standard from a machine, and that machine will be trained by a human. And that will take some time. And again, that will take some trust that's built up. And the only way we can do that, I think, honestly, right now is repetition, which comes back to cost, because we have to do these things over and over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. I got to interview a while ago, head of ethics at Emory, Dr. Paul Root-Wolpe, and he is also a technologist. I think he was the first director of ethics at NASA, just a really brilliant guy. And he is not anti-technology at all. He is the master of thinking about unintended consequences. And one of the things he talks about is, look, there is no doubt in our mind that autonomous vehicles in every measurable way will benefit human flourishing. They'll benefit distracted driving, it's almost incalculable when they work well. The challenge comes in, though, that when a human, who we say that the human's the gold standard of the driver, well, the insurance actuaries will pull out their tables and say, hold on, here are these circumstances. But we'll hold the machine to a higher standard. It's just our nature. How did you make that decision? Even though it's the fraction of the fraction of the fraction of the percent, whereas a humans, maybe it's a fraction of the percent. It's certainly not going to be multiple levels deep. And so we've got this tension between, we want to create a gold standard. We assume a human being will create a gold standard because we're for human flourishing. At least that's, hopefully we are. But we make mistakes, right? Being human, we make mistakes. Yep. But we don't want our machines to make mistakes. And it's this weird tension when you're in the space that you are, which is, look at the opportunity that we can use products and ideas or whatever to help companies flourish, which is another way of saying helping humans flourish. And yet it's going to miss sometimes. And so how do we do it where people recognize that? They still have the courage to proceed. Just know we're going to learn as we go, but at moments it might be lumpy.
Yeah, I mean, we may need a sociologist for this or something, but because I think it's super interesting, and part of what I felt when you were going through that is there's this concept where if a human makes a mistake, it can be now obviously there are
For sure.
various different magnitudes of the mistakes
Right.
that humans can make. But if a
Right.
human makes a mistake, it can be explained. You know, the human made the mistake, or
Right.
it can be more importantly, it can be what's the word? It can be contained,
Right.
right? It was this human in this situation, and this was the mistake made, where you unleash a machine that can do things in orders of magnitude more scale. Oh my gosh! Not only did we send out the wrong colored, invitations to this bride to be, we sent it to all of the brides to be in the
Right.
catalog. Right, like that's a little bit different, and so that was part of kind of what resonates. But the other pieces I think is just that explainability. Oh, David was tired,
Right.
or whatever. He didn't get the memo of the updated something
Right.
versus we don't know why it made that decision. It just did, which is really scary because there's a lot of times in these black box AI scenarios, which I think, slows adoption quite a bit. Is some companies think, oh, this is my intellectual property. I'm not going to tell anybody. I've solved a really big problem, but I'm not telling anyone how, or I'm not telling them why I gave you the answer of 42. I'm just telling you the answer is 42,
Right.
which we all know is the meaning of life, of course,
Right. Of course.
but not why.
Right.
That slows adoption, and that makes it a little bit scary because what if it's not 42?
Right.
And so we try to take an approach where it's as open as we can be with the technology that we have.
Yeah. Or it's 42. You don't, it's 42, but it's because the cloud, like these thousand random things that will never be there again. It just happened to be, yeah, today in that rare instance. A good friend of mine recently retired as CEO of Accenture and Accenture Digital. And we were having a conversation at that time. Gosh, this had to be a couple years ago, maybe longer than that. I can't remember now. But it might have been then Facebook. I forget who, but somebody was experimenting with a machine teaching another machine.
Sure.
And this machine was
Sure.
super smart and really go. And it was like, hey, now go teach machine two. And I started to teach it. And then they started talking in a language that people didn't understand that were monitoring it. Then they cut the people out. And people were
Right.
like,
Right.
what? And I'm probably missing some of the story, but it was something like this. And so they went and unplugged everything. And I was asking Mike about it. And I said, what do you think happened? Was Skynet about to, what was about to? And he said, probably what happened. Like, we don't know for sure. And I've never followed up to see what it was. But he said, what most likely happened is machine has a mission, and it's to teach this other machine. And so there was nothing nefarious. It just figured out, oh, you speak this, I speak that too.
Sure.
My teachers taught me in this language, but I can teach you more accurately, more effectively, quicker in this language, so I'm going to do it. And part of my program is to be as efficient as possible. So why am I wasting energy with these monkeys that are looking over my shoulder that are just eating the pages I'm getting them anyway? They have no idea what's going on. So let me just do this, and when we're done and we tell them 42, we'll be good. And so there was, he said, we'll figure it out in the end, but it's when not only do things make a decision that we can't verify, but when they go about doing things in a way that causes anxiety, we don't go to trust right away. We go to suspicion. And
No,
look,
absolutely.
and sometimes
Absolutely.
that's the right thing. But it's just this world that we're working in that's moving so fast, and there's so much opportunity, but there's so much scale. We're just trying to find our way through these colliding situations.
Yeah, and look, we when we're talking about scale, on here, and this is probably something that resonates with your business as well. Our business certainly is about, again, breaking down that language barrier and engaging the world, right? Use our technology, use Transifex to help your company engage and meet your customers where they are. Right. Well, guess what? A lot of these customers are in areas that we would call having low resource, so low resource languages. So there are a lot of people that speak Mandarin. However, the amount of text that's available to train these models and things like we are is far less than it is in English. Right. And you have your big languages out there, like Spanish, French, and so on. But you have a ton of these low resource languages that right now have the potential of widening the technology gap a little bit. And what I mean by that is we're going to benefit from all of these great things that we can do with generative AI and things like that, because a lot of these models are trained in English. This is our native language. That's fantastic. What about those folks who speak Swahili or Hindi? Oh my gosh, how many people speak Hindi? And Hindi is considered a low resource language when it comes to what is available to train these LLMs. Wow. And so as companies like yourself are going and expanding and getting compute and getting data centers and colos and things in kind of these far off places, we hope that our technology can engage with your technology a little bit, and we can start to onboard sort of new languages, new materials and things, so we don't widen that technology gap, but we actually can use the breaking down of language barriers, the localization, if you will, the removing that tension that exists between two people or two businesses by expanding on what's available to train these models.
I love that idea. Love it, love it, love it, because at least a third of the world is not connected to the internet, and half of the world is not connected to broadband, which is another way to say they're not connected to the modern economy. And if you're not connected to the modern economy, it comes with risks for sure. We've seen the impact, first generation or two experiencing social media. We're not wanting to get rid of social media, but we're learning how to navigate through it better as it impacts us in a wide variety of areas. But if you're not connected to it, what chance do you have of getting out of poverty? Like what chance do you have of helping your community flourish? And if your community doesn't have much of an opportunity to flourish, it leads to bad behavior, or it just desperation, and so anyway.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There's this feeling of being left behind, I think, a little bit too. And look, while I am not the right demographic for Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse, right? It's just I'm not interested in putting on the goggles and sort of living in the alternative universe. But I get it, and if it was a way that I could speak in real-time communication with somebody that doesn't speak my language, that's interesting to me. Yeah. And so while it's inside or outside of a virtual universe, just that concept of being able to natively speak, and you with your headphones on, as fast as I'm saying it, you're hearing it in your native language and back and forth. That is a way that we can ramp up the connection to the modern economy with folks and get them engaged. But unfortunately, right now, we have those low resource languages. So we need you guys to keep building so we can get people closer and we can get people connected, because while I'm never going to put on the funny glasses, it is going to be really, really amazing to speak to somebody in their native language with no delays. When we have the technology to train models that efficiently and enough compute power that we can do this cloud-based, and we can do it in near real time. That's pretty exciting.
I completely agree. I'm not interested either in the funny glasses, but I have learned not to say I'm never gonna follow something like that, because there may come a breakthrough or something. Before we go, and I know we're coming up on time here in a few minutes, one of the things that my world is dealing with a lot is this idea of data sovereignty. So what we're talking about is, how do I connect communities? How do I help one community that wants to communicate with another community, do it in a way that actually communicates the intended idea, Does data sovereignty come into play into this at all? Which is this idea, the way that I'm understanding of, certain data has to live within either a geographic boundary, a nation state boundary, whatever, some governmental imposed boundary, because it's a particular type of data, whatever that may be, that changes depending upon the governing body. Does that impact this idea of localization? Is it impacted positively? Is it still an area that you guys are developing in? How does this impact you?
Yeah, it really does. It really does, because we are a software, but we're a cloud-based provider of our technology, and you have a few different areas of data sovereignty that come into it. One is even outside of us, Transifex specifically, or the localization technology providers specifically. You just have that. How can these large companies use data to train their LLMs, right? There's just like, wait a second, you took all of my writing catalog and now you're using that. And if people are generating prose, it could actually be based on my specific writing style. Like, there's some strangeness there that exists. But if you just want to get down to the specific governmental control side of it, is we are hosted in a US-based cloud provider. And so all of our technology is sitting in the US. So when we have customers, and about 55% of our customers are outside of the US. So when we have customers who want to use our specific methods of training our Transifex AI-based translation with their specific data, we cannot take their contextual data from the European Union and process it in our data centers in the US. So what we have had to do as a company is think about is we actually have to either have them give explicit rights for us to do that, because you can't without explicit rights. Right. And if they don't want to grant explicit rights, then we have a second instance in Europe that would be required to process that specific data, right? And that's all because of the new government regulations. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. They're just what they are, and something we didn't think about a few years ago because we weren't training specific LLMs for use for AI-based translations, and some of these laws just didn't exist. But they're going to get more complex to navigate, which is going to make it harder for us to provide our services. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out ways around it. But no, it's not something that we can ignore. It's a real issue, and there's a lot of merit behind why those laws are in place, and so we'll adapt.
Right. Look, my industry, the infrastructure side of it is adapting as well, but it's a complexity that everybody's trying to work through. There's good reasons. Even, I don't know if it applies to you because you're in the cloud, but we have a number of folks that are putting infrastructure in our data centers that sometimes they're told they can't use certain hardware. That hardware comes from a source that we don't approve of, or it can't go into a data center that has a government entity in it, and everyone's trying to sort through. So what does that mean? What does that mean to my supply chain? What does that mean to my production? What does that mean to just all of these areas? And back to speed, acceleration, and cost. It's impactful while we're trying to build. And I'm 100% on board with, yes, let's think through it. But many times we're trying to connect to groups where it's impacting them negatively. In other words, if you're trying to expand into marketplaces that are underserved now, and we've got to go through these layers of complexity, it's just complex. I'm not trying to make a moral judgment.
Well, and sometimes we make a business decision that it's just, you know what, we're not going to go focus on that area right now because it's too complex. And it's unfortunate because we're in the business of expanding and allowing companies to have global strategies. But certainly there are some of these regulations that are coming into place that have us sort of second guess and say, geez, is it worth us putting up a third instance, a fourth instance in that locale so we can provide these advanced services? Maybe we will provide our basic services out of the US and we won't provide them the advanced services there. Right. That's unfortunate because we're back to increasing that technology gap.
Right. How is it back to speed and scale? Is localization widely adopted already, or is it like so many of these other marketplaces, I think we talked
Just
about
getting started.
Yeah.
We think that the market is about 8% served, so about 92% underserved. And I think about it like this: a CEO has the concept that says, "Hey, we've proven out our technology in the United States or in Spain or wherever it is. We're going global." And that's their ideas. They have this global strategy of it. The folks down, the heads of product and development and so on, are going, "Oh gosh, well, I better translate all this stuff. We got to translate our marketing material. We got to translate our in-app, product pieces and so on. How do we go translate this stuff?" Right. And then there's a third tier that's saying, yeah, you need some localization technology. There's some language technology out there. I got it. But it is not up to the C-suite. So the market itself is a little bit undervalued, and the market is underpenetrated for sure. Our biggest competitor, which is crazy, is still passing around strings in an Excel spreadsheet, right? It's just like we're talking about generative AI doing AI-based translations of hundreds of millions of strings, kind of simultaneously or continuously, if you will, and 92% of the market is still passing around an Excel spreadsheet with all their website content on it, saying, "Hey, can you give it to somebody who can translate this stuff to Spanish? Give it back to the developers. They'll plug it back into the website, and we'll have a Spanish-based translation." It's crazy how underserved it is,
and probably in many cases not a check and balance, whether that's a tool or a human to say, yeah, that's what we meant to say, or yeah, that's the right image. Like many times you get the picture right, but you get the words wrong, or you get the words right, but that image is not an image you would put out there. And so,
or if you've optimized for English and you have a button that says submit, and I don't know how to say submit in German, but my guess is it's longer than 5 characters.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Chris, we have talked a lot today. What haven't we talked on that we should have mentioned before we wrap up? Anything?
I will just say that I'm very bullish about how localization is going to really help close the technology gap. I know we talked a lot about how it can continue to widen it, but as we see technologies that are making it easier for some of those who are currently not connected to the internet to get connected to the internet, I'm hopeful and I'm bullish on the fact that we are going to see more content generated from these low resource languages. We are going to get that into these big LLMs and things, and that we're going to see this as a net positive to closing that technology gap. And while we did touch on that topic, I just wanted to leave with a little bit of a hopeful sign here that I really believe that we can help companies and we can help people bridge that language barrier and truly engage across the world.
I think that's a great perspective. As you're talking, I'm just imagining organizations like mine that have so many leaders speaking in so many areas. And we're a pretty lean organization. So if I'm going to rely upon just parts of my marketing group and other groups that I want to do all of this across all the different platforms that we're, public speaking or doing content like this or whatever, as we want to move into other markets, whether they're underserved markets or not, to rely upon that small group to do all the work is probably just not feasible.
It's not tenable, right? It's just, it really isn't. And that's where that underserving of this market comes from. And I imagine that this conversation will remain in English. And I imagine that you have customers or you have just interested listeners in other languages that would appreciate hearing this conversation. And that's what I'm saying is the amount of content that's being generated versus what's being localized is just fraction of a percent.
Well, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And if people want to learn more about you or this topic, where can they go to?
Yeah, the best place is check out our website. We have some great material there. It's transifex.com, trans like translation, and then IFEX, TRANSIFEX.
All right, we'll make sure we include a link below. Hey, if you liked this conversation, click the like button. And if you loved it, subscribe. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.